Good morning. These are some pictures of a volleyball player from the 1980s. He ventured out, tried something new, made a lot of mistakes along the way, but ended up finding a personal passion that spanned many years. Since these pictures, he's played college volleyball, men's club volleyball, a lot of sand volleyball, and has even coached high school volleyball. Anybody have any idea who this is? It's me. So why am I standing up here telling you a story that took place more than 30 years ago? Well, you see, now there's another Mertler running around volleyball courts all around the country. Number 4 in the white jerseys and number 44 in the others is my 16-year-old son, Addison. And I just want to say publicly, I am so jealous of him because look how much cooler and flashier his uniforms are than mine was 30 years ago. So what does all or any of this have to do with being wrong? Well, you see, Addison is a very good volleyball player on his high school team. He's made all conference teams. He's made all tournament teams. He's been voted his high school team's MVP 2 years in a row as a sophomore and as a junior. In May, he was invited to join an elite club of 17-year-olds. And remember, he's still only 16. To be blunt, this team that he plays on now is incredible. These guys are ranked in the top 10 in the country among 17-year-old club teams. Earlier this summer at the East Coast Championships in Virginia and the USA Volleyball Nationals in Houston, the courts that we were playing on were surrounded by college coaches from some of the top programs in the country. It's a pretty cool thing for Addison. It's a pretty cool thing for his dad, too. In fact, the whole experience has been pretty cool. Although I will tell you that my wife is getting really volleyballed out after this summer's experience. But it's given a father and a son an opportunity to experience a shared passion. It's given us an opportunity to travel around the country, meet lots of people, and to spend a lot of quality time together as a family. However, if I were to tell you that this whole experience has been sunshine and roses, I would be lying to you. The reason that I say that is because Addison has had a very steep learning curve when it's come to playing volleyball at this level. He's worked very hard this summer, but he's made a lot of mistakes on the court. He's been forced to deal with the consequences of those mistakes. And for somebody who had done so well on his high school team, he wasn't used to this. He and I have had numerous conversations, sometimes very lengthy conversations, about how to deal with the consequences of his mistakes. And probably more importantly, how not to dwell on his mistakes. You know, as children, when we think about being wrong, I think we typically are talking about or thinking about being taught the difference between right and wrong. And when you're young kids, to me that's a dichotomy. It's an either-or kind of thing. Yeah, you're right or you're wrong. Furthermore, children, young children, aren't afraid to be wrong. They're not afraid to try things, to put themselves out there just because there might be the potential that they'll be wrong in the process. They don't care about that. However, as adults, there's a lot more gray area. I don't see right and wrong as a dichotomy for us. I see it as a continuum that ranges from being right on one end of the spectrum to being not quite right, at least not yet, on the other end of the spectrum. The reason that I say that is because I think as adults and as professional educators, most of us fall somewhere in the middle of that continuum. But we're always striving to get to the right end of the continuum. We're always striving to do what's right for our students, to make the right decisions for them. We're all here today to talk about taking action. You know, when we take action of any sort, it often means putting ourselves out there, taking risks. Sometimes our efforts will pay off. Many times they won't. You know, there are a lot of people out there who, as adults, see, if we could hang on to that attitude that we have as young children, we would benefit from it as adults, but many adults don't do that. In fact, they have come to view risk and failure as being one and the same. Unlike all of you here today, they will avoid taking risks simply because they don't want to be wrong. Simply because they don't want to fail. In his book titled Poke the Box, anybody familiar with Poke the Box? Oh, you have to get this book and read it. It's one of the easiest reads you'll ever experience, but it's just filled with profound information. In this book, Seth Godin talks a lot about the risks associated with taking action. In fact, in one point in the book, he makes a statement that to me is very profound, and I want to share that with you. He says, when the cost of poking the box is less than the cost of doing nothing, then you should poke the box. Allow me to restate that in our culture of learning context. When the cost of taking action is less than the cost of doing nothing, then you should take action. Further, Mr. Godin states that poking the box doesn't mean being right. It means taking action. Now, if you read between the lines, what he's saying is, taking action is the important thing. You're allowed to be wrong. It's okay to be wrong. If you didn't take action in the first place, you wouldn't have the opportunity to be wrong. If you're familiar with any of my work, and Adam mentioned this in the introduction, you know that one of my personal and professional passions is classroom-based action research. Action research is filled with the potential to be wrong. Action research is about systematic trial and error into what works and what doesn't work in your classroom. It's about trying new and different things in an attempt to improve how you teach and how your students learn. Sometimes when we try these things, they'll work great. Many times, not so much. I liken it to Edison's invention of the light bulb. Many, many failures that preceded the successes. You know, as an aside, I don't like the word failure. I've come really not to like the word failure. Because to me, failure implies the complete lack of any sort of success. But I believe that whenever we take risks and we try something new, even if they're not successful, we stand to learn something as a result of having engaged ourselves in that process. We stand to benefit from having had that experience. Sometimes it's a matter of having to go back to the drawing board and take what we've learned from the process to move forward and continue on. Now, I love to be wrong. How many of you believe that statement? Show of hands. No, really, I don't love to be wrong. Who among us really loves to be wrong? Who among us, maybe even worse, loves to be told that we're wrong? You know, a little over a year ago, I found myself in a situation where my supervisors were constantly telling me that what I was doing was wrong. Now, I thought I was being innovative. They thought I was being wrong. Clearly, we were not on the same page. That situation culminated in what I thought at the time was an incredibly devastating decision. But I want to be honest with you. In the time that I've had to reflect on myself as a person as well as a professional educator in the last year, I've learned more about myself, both personally and professionally, things that I could have not anticipated learning about myself 2 or 3 years ago. That experience to me, as much as I may not have liked it, was invaluable. Now, I'm not saying that we should focus all of our energies on being wrong. That should not be our goal, just on the contrary. But what I am saying is that when we're wrong, or when we think about being wrong, I think that we would all be very wise to anticipate it, to be prepared for it, and to welcome it if and when it comes. I want to share the advice with you that I share with my son before he steps on the volleyball court. I tell him that when you make a mistake, you have 5 seconds to think about that mistake. You have 5 seconds to process it, 5 seconds to dwell on it, but then you have to internally commit yourself to finding something positive to take away from that mistake and then move forward. You know why? It's volleyball. Whether you're ready or not, next serve's coming over the net. You better be ready. But I would say the same thing to you as a group of dedicated professional educators. When you take any sort of action, regardless of what the context is, and you may make a mistake, you may not be as successful as you had anticipated. I would encourage you to take 5 seconds to think about it, to contemplate it, but then internally commit yourselves to finding something positive to take away from that experience. You must move on. Being wrong is not the culminating aspect of that experience. You have to move on because your next action is needed. It's necessary. It's waiting for you. Furthermore, you have to do it with positivity. Because I believe that if you don't approach it with positivity, then you're making the conscious choice to focus on the negative aspect of making a mistake instead of focusing on the positive aspect of learning from the mistake. So what I want to do today is challenge each and every one of you to take action in your personal and professional lives. But I also want you to be willing to embrace the wrong that resides in each one of you. Try to commit yourself to that 5-second rule. You may need 7 or 8 seconds or something like that, but try to commit yourself to finding some positive aspect of the wrong that you have committed, because you are going to need that to continue your forward momentum. You know, as I was preparing this talk, I began preparing it 2 or 3 months ago, it really gave me a lot of cause to reflect. And one of the things that I began to realize is that perhaps I like the thought of being wrong a little bit more than I previously thought I had. And I think you should too. Thank you very much.